Good afternoon, dear students. In this video lecture, we considering positioning the institution in the market. In today's highly competitive higher education marketplace, like all service organizations, universities have to justify their existence and stand out from the crowd, offering products and services in ways that make them distinct from other players. The consequences of failing to position themselves successfully in the marketplace are wide-ranging and include operation in the shadow of other players, surviving on the edge of the market, and at worst facing closure on account of non-viability. Market segmentation is a key strategy to positioning the institution which examines the competitive advantages of a university, yet allows it to serve its markets in the most effective manner. This video lecture explores the idea of market segmentation and its application within the higher education context, using both theoretical and empirical evidence to demonstrate its relevance to institutional positioning. And it seeks to achieve three key objectives. The objective number one, to clarify the meaning of the concept by examining the way it's defined in the literature, exploring its broad rationale, and illustrating how it's related to similar concepts such as targeting and positioning. To examine a range of market segmentation strategies, this is second objective, that have direct relevance to the higher education sector. The objective number three, to review empirical evidence showing the application of a range of market segmentation strategies employed by educational institutions. Positioning the university. The goal of market segmentation is to fit into institutional positioning process. Hirsch has argued that higher education is a positional good in which some institutions and their degrees offer better social status and lifetime opportunities than others in the eyes of students, parents, and employers. Studies which investigate factors associated with institutional or course choice by higher education students suggest that among the many influencing factors, course and institutional reputation issues constitute the broad rationalization for enrollment decisions. Thus, there is a competition among producers and consumers in a positional market, where the former compete for the best students and the latter for the most preferred institutions. Because no single institution can be excellent at everything, and no one institution can address the needs of all customer groups, New universities need to identify specific aspects around which they can position themselves in the market. Positioning is therefore an image creation process, aptly defined as the process of designing an image and value so that consumers within the target segments understand what the company or brand stands for in relation to its competitors. So, it involves at least three key stages. The first stage, the identification and development of organizational brand or value. Image and expectations associated with key products of the organization. The stage number 2 about deciding on segments of the market upon which the organization should focus. And finally, third stage, implementing the positioning concept. For example, the United Kingdom higher education system is globally associated with the Oxbridge brand, and this has helped place United Kingdom higher education among the most sought after the world. The US brand leaders are Princeton, Harvard, and Yale, which grew out of the Oxbridge tradition. For example, in Australia and Australian National, Melbourne and Sydney University have ranked highest in their brand rankings and together provide the image and reputation that Australian higher education has on a global scale. The challenge for new institutions is that on fully understanding the global branding environment and then deciding how to fit and blend into this overall image. The starting point in this process is to identify the structure of the market and the positions currently held by competitors within the market. Now consider clarifying the terminological jungle surrounding the concept of segmentation. It's important to make clear the distinction between the seemingly similar concepts of segmentation, targeting, and positioning. The ideas constitute part of a seamless process of strategic marketing. This is why the terms are sometimes used interchangeably, especially in everyday parlance. However, they occupy very distinct position in the strategic marketing cycle, and those have specific meanings attached to them. And if you look at figure 1, you can see stages in segmentation, targeting, and positioning process. The process begins with the identification of the organization's current position, capabilities, aims, opportunities, and constraints so as realistically to assess and analyze the institution situation. This is followed by market segmentation, involving first and foremost the identification of segmentation variables, followed by developing profiles for each segment. Market targeting is the third stage in the process, which involves an evaluation of the potential for the organization to adequately serve the identified market segment. This includes decisions about feasibility, resource capability, and ultimately profitability. Within each identified segment, the organization needs to identify a specific core product which acts as an axis for positioning the organization in the market. Finally, the organization needs to develop an appropriate blend of suitable marketing elements as part of a strategy to communicate, promote, and deliver the product or service in a way which results in desired customer satisfaction. Market segmentation is thus an integral part of the process of positioning an organization within the market in a way which allows the organization to identify correctly those segments of the market to which it can most completely, competently, and satisfactorily deliver its services and products. Although segmentation has its own strategies and approaches based on a variety of rationales and objectification, it is part of an organization's long-term strategy. This strategy is to increase competitiveness, enhance the profile and image of the institution, widen the market share, and indeed rise the game in the market where survival has been merely a function of existence and become one of the establishing a distinct uniqueness and character which meets or exceeds customer expectations and aspirations. Institutions seeking to undertake market segmentation and positioning strategies require a sound understanding of the nature of their market. The key to this understanding lies in undertaking market segmentation research. Although the concept has been defined variously over the past 20 years, essentially market segmentation makes a fundamental assumption that buyers or consumers within a specified market are not a homogeneous entity. They differ in many respects, and some of these differences are great enough to warrant differentiated approaches in dealing with subgroups within the market. A few definitions illustrating this key assumption have been set below. For example, Theodore Levitt, reacting to the generic strategy of the 1980s, which sought to expand markets through diversification, is largely credited with rising awareness about segmentation as both a cost-effective and resource-efficient strategy for dealing with expanding markets. Theodore Levitt wrote, "The marketer should stop thinking of his customer as part of some massively homogeneous market. He must start thinking of them as numerous small islands of distinctiveness, each of which requires its own unique strategies in product policy, in promotional strategy, in pricing, in distribution methods, and in direct selling techniques." This has the same direct relevance to higher education as it has to the business and industrial enterprise about which Levitt was written. For example, three major distinct groupings have been identified for the undergraduate higher education sector for which differentiated marketing strategies are needed. The largest group is the home student segment, which basically comprises local school-leaving students entering higher education for the first time. The second is the international student group, a fast-growing segment in many countries, especially in the major economies of the First World. For example, the USA, Canada, the UK, Australia and New Zealand are the major global importers of higher educational students. A third major segment in the mature age student group comprising adult students coming to higher education not directly from school. These three segments have widely different motivating for joining higher education and may have expectations about the gains to be delivered to them through higher education. They also differ in many other ways, including age, culture, ethnicity, gender and language, which make them distinct individuals and groups within the higher education market. Those differentiated marketing strategies will be required at various levels of the life circles and experience of higher education. Under this broad assumption about markets, segmentation has been defined as the means of categorizing potential customers into like groups based on common characteristics. The grouping of customers and non-customers with similar characteristics, especially purchasing behavior. The division of a market into different homogeneous group of consumers. Essentially, market segmentation is the process of dividing a large group of consumers into smaller groups within which broadly similar consumption patterns exist. The idea is to break down the heterogeneous market group of consumers into more strategically manageable parts which can be targeted and satisfied more precisely through appropriate manipulation of the elements of marketing mix 4 piece, 5 piece, or 7 piece. The purpose and value of market segmentation. Doyle has identified 5 broad reasons for market segmentation, which we shall examine briefly in the context of higher education. There are to meet consumer needs and more precisely, to increase profit, to gain segment leadership, to retain customers, to develop focused marketing communications. So the first segment, to meet customer needs more precisely. To meet customer needs more precisely. In higher education, the demands and needs of adult and mature students are different from those of school leavers. For example, while adult and mature students may join higher education for purely instrumental reasons, such as preparing themselves for promotion and more demanding roles in their workplace. A significant number of school leavers come to university primarily because they are expected to. The same curriculum using similar delivery models may not have the same appeal to these constraining groups of learners. What is needed is to develop distinct marketing mix strategies for each group, especially to address customer needs more accurately and appropriately. Next segment. Next context, sorry. To increase profits. The concept of profits is naturally associated with price, especially in the business and commercial sense. The idea is to set the price of the service or good so that customers get their money's worth while the organization makes a profit. Consumers do not react uniformly to prices of services and goods. Some will be happy with low-priced goods and services. Others will only buy when the price is high, as this tends to be associated with higher quality, prestige, and class. The development of the executive MBA, which targets aspiring senior executives of companies and which is more highly priced than generic MBA degrees, has been developed on the understanding that there is a segment of consumers who will not mind paying a high price for that product. A key to increasing profitability is therefore to understand the buying of purchasing behaviors of different segments of the market and to develop products and services that correspond to those behaviors. Next, context to gain segment leadership. It's difficult for new entrants into markets to establish leadership immediately. Indeed, leadership in a market is often attributed to the brands which have dominant shares of the market and which are those profitable to the organization. New players in a market can, however, take a dominant share of a particular market segment. For example, the Open University has a dominant presence in the adult and mature students market, while others are establishing themselves as dominant players within specific groups of subject disciplines. Next, the context to retain customers. Having identified the specific market segments and organizations wishes to serve, the challenge is to retain the customers throughout their lives. However, their needs are dynamic. Following the experience of undergraduate study, a consumer's needs will change. It is thus important for the institution to invest time and resources into continuous process of identification of new customer needs as they pass through different phases of their life circles. Postgraduate students have different needs from those of undergraduates. As postgraduates, they may have their own families, have graduate loans to pay off, and have more urgent employment needs. New experiences designed to meet these new needs thus become a prerequisite for retaining customers over longer periods. Thus, a key aspect of segmentation is that of continuous identification of customer needs from pre-entry levels to the premium end of the market, as a strategy for developing enhanced products and services along the value chain. Next context is to develop focused marketing communications. The key to reaching sorry, the key to reaching customers is through use appropriate communication channels. Not all customers have the same access, nor do they have the same preferences of communication channels. Female students are more likely to read a fashion magazine while their male students surf the internet. To target female students as a specific higher education segment, fashion magazines are likely to be the favorable communication channel rather than the computer. About 1 million homes in the United Kingdom do not have access to digital TV. Communication messages aimed at disadvantaged students through the digital mode of TV transmission are likely to reach the intended audiences. Market segmentation thus helps institutions to identify appropriate communication needs and target media focused directly on specific customer groups. Next, approaches to segmenting markets. The starting point in understanding market segmentation is to identify what may be called naturally occurring segments within the market, as discussed previous in this video lecture. Clearly, within this broad grouping of students are a variety of subgroups of segments which can be drawn up by identifying factors which make them distinguishable and unique from the other segments. However, since segments can be drawn and defined upon multiple variables, it is important to bear in mind factors which affect the feasibility of segmentation. Wilson and Gilligan have identified 6 such factors which they insist should be considered when justifying attending to a specific market segment. Segments worth pursuing in the market should be: the first, measurable. It should be possible to apply measurement to the variable of the segment. The criteria used to identify segments should thus be operational. This could include estimating statistical and demographical information about the segment in terms of population size and structure, the segment's attitudes to higher education, buying behavior, and anticipated benefits. Next, accessible. For a segment to be available, there has to to be established ways in which its members can be accessed, or at least there should be a viable plan for reaching them. In higher education, there are well-known hard-to-reach segments which have become the market of choice for some universities. For example, traditionally, students from low socioeconomic environments have been known to have a poor record of participation in higher education, and some institutions have taken it upon themselves to give priority consideration to the students in their enrollment policies. This had led to the development of tailored packages to meet the unique needs of these students. Essentially, there are four broad categories into which segmentation strategies can be grouped: geographic or geodemographic, demographic, behavioral, and psychographic. Uh, we start from geographic or geodemographic. The oldest and most frequently used method, geodemographic segmentation, involves dividing markets into geographical zones such as countries, cities, regions, and even postcode areas. Its essential purpose is to provide the base for targeting customers in particular areas who exhibit similar behavioral patterns. In international higher education, the Asia-Pacific region is known for its relative economic stability and growth potential and sends forth almost 50% of the world's higher educational migrants to different parts of the world. A key feature of geodemographic segmentation is that it utilizes census enumeration district data as basis units for analysis and try to investigate profiles of people within those sets and their behavioral or purchasing patterns. For institutions which have an interest in international market within the United European Union, a broad geodemographic segmentation has been proposed by Waldemer, which identifies six groupings of European based on demographic age, income, language, school living age, and geographic location. The classification shows that some potential customers of higher education share common characteristics across Europe, making it possible for institutions to target relatively large demographic segments that transcend national boundaries. Next segment is demographic segmentation. Age, sex, and family life circle are considered to be the key variables in this type of segmentation. However, age or um, neither age or no sex alone is a good predictor of customer behavior in a variety of contexts. Nevertheless, there is growing evidence showing that women's and girls' participation in higher education is increasing at a faster rate than that of the male counterparts, and that this could be associated with boys' reduced engagement, motivation, interest, and performance at the lower levels of schooling. This has implications for teaching and learning both at primary and secondary levels, and at higher education level too, including the need to develop support strategies for the large but endangered male segment of learning population. Choice in higher education is another aspect which continues to reflect gender bias, with the majority of female students opting for studies in the arts, humanities, fashion, music, dance, and media, while the science, mathematics, and engineering fields remain male dominant. However, applied science and medical fields such as medicine, pharmacology, and oceanography are increasingly becoming favorable higher education study areas for female students. While the majority of higher education learners are within the 18 to 24 years bracket, a greater focus is now being placed on 25-35 years bracket for moral, political, economic, and social justice reasons. Thus, a new segment for higher education has been created for which new types of provision need to be developed, and the needs and characteristics of this group are bound to be different from the traditional school living group. The life circle concept has been the most widely used variable for demography-based segmentation. It's based on assumption that during the course of their lives, consumers are likely to pass through fairly predictable life phases, and that these phases demand different purchasing behaviors. For higher education, typical life circle phases could include young and single, majority of higher education students, young and married with or without children, majority of early postgraduate students, middle age with or without children, majority of late postgraduate, for example, doctoral students, and older married solitary retired. This is most part-time graduate or postgraduate students. Some of these groups are more vulnerable than others and could be considered as disadvantaged and thus can be incorporated into institutional strategy framework for widening participation within those segments. Other demographic variables often used to segment higher education groups are income and social class. For example, Ross and O'Reilly have developed a seven-tier social class system with higher managerial and professional occupations at the top and routine occupation at the bottom. However, income alone does not necessarily determine educational aspirations. A plumber may earn more money than a teacher, but children of teachers and other similar professionals tend to be more positively disposed towards engaging with higher education. In conclusion, demographic and demographic basis of segmentation thus utilize characteristics of the consumer or the environment as a way of identifying market segments. They have been criticized for being imprecise predictors of segments, as people do not always fall into neat categories because of their outward characteristics or indeed as a consequence of their neighborhood. Better predictors of competent segmentation have been found to be based on the consumer's behavior. Next categories into which segmentation strategies can be grouped is behavioral segmentation. This comprises a wide range of behavioral measures, including consumers' attitudes, knowledge, benefits sought by the consumer, usage rates, and response to a product. Benefits sought is probably the most widely used framework for behavioral segmentation, and it's premised on the assumption that the key reason a consumer purchases a product or service is to provide solutions to their problems. These solutions are their intended benefits, and they constitute the most appropriate basis for segmentation a market. In a study of the impact of new fees regime on student Students' attitudes to higher education conducted for the Higher Education Academy. Um, was found that potential students who were averse to debt could be separated into four groups. The majority were risky. The majority were risk-based averse, that is, that feared that going to university was a risk both in terms of financial disinvestment and in terms of there being no guarantee of employment to offset the financial investment. The second group comprised those we called sticky price risk averse students. This group simply thinks that the new fees are too high and not affordable. A relatively smaller group was culturally debt averse. It comprised students who just did not have a place for debt in their lives. Some section of the Muslim community simply do not use credit cards and buy everything they own using cash. Their children, therefore, would not be expected to accept the new loan system which government was introducing to help students pay for their higher education. Finally, a small group of students would not get into debt just to just to experience a life of fun, uh, drink and drugs with which they associated universities. And this group called lifestyle debt averse students. A one size fits all appeals to that students to understand the benefits of the loan system to finance higher education would certainly be inadequate as it would fail to address the different needs of different segments of students' debt aversion. A survey in the USA found that there were several benefit segments in the market for MBA qualifications. For example, quality seekers were only interested in top-ranked institutions for the prestige and opportunities for advancement that the quality MBA guaranteed in the market. By contrast, by contrast, there were avoiders who looked for MBA program requiring the least effort to complete because they believe that all MBAs are the same, and they tend to seek low-cost programs. Yet another group consists of convinced seekers who will join any MBA program which is closest to where they live and at low cost. Similar segments have been identified in Australia by Everett and Armstrong. More recently, EV using respondents analysis have examined university image and MBA student requirement in South Africa and found six distinct benefit segments. And there are job markets and status seekers that tend to join the prestigious universities, including those offering offshore programs from the USA and United Kingdom. Then, business skills developers tend to utilize the local technikon institution, while personal skills seekers tend to join the more flexible open university programs. And other segments included network seekers who tended to join institutions with specific prominent academics and job promotion seekers and career planners. The adult learning market has recently been the subject of significant researches in the United Kingdom, based on the assumption that the market is not homogeneous. A recent study has been undertaken to identify attitudes to learning. perceived barriers to learning, attitudes to and past experience of education. Also, basic skills needed, experiences of learning post full-time education, likely future participation in learning activities, competing with individuals' time for learning, and attitudes to different learning models, also personality, lifestyles, and media consumption. Data obtained was subject to factor and cluster analysis and resulted in the identification of segments of the adult learner sector. 7 segments were identified on the basis of the interest to learn, including personality, disinterested, and switched off adult, who together comprised 32% of the adult population. The next group, low priority, then independence and conflicting priorities, making 33% of the adult population. Work motivated and enthusiasts, who together comprises 35% of the adult population. Behavioral segmentation probably provides the greatest promise for identifying specific segments that can be targeted both in terms of marketing and communicating messages for requirement purpose, and more importantly for customer retention purpose. Next categories is psychographic. While the behavioral base for segmentation highlights issues such as the benefits sought by customers, brand loyalty, and perceptions of usefulness of the product, psychographic segmentation uses variables such as the activities of the applicants, their interests, opinions, attitudes, and values. It is a lifestyle approach of differentiating educational markets. One such segmentation approach was used by Roberts in 1999 years, in which he found that male applicants to university tend to use the internet more than female applicants, who depends more on information in magazines. The implication of this was that in order to reach out to female applicants, the internet would be a relatively ineffective medium of communication. Psychographic segmentation stems from the early work of Reisman, which led to identification of 3 distinct types of social characterization of people. Uh, Distinct types of social features of people. They argued that societies are basically made up of 3 distinct types of social groups. First are the traditionalists, who change little over time. Their behavior, including purchasing and decision making, can thus be fairly accurately predicted. In higher education, for example, because of the mileage they have over other groups, both in terms of economic and political power. Middle class families tend to keep faith with the older universities, which they believe offer the best opportunities for their children to occupy positions to power and influence in various sectors of the economy and public life. This second group comprises the other directed, where individuals shift their thinking to fit in and adapt to the behavior of their peer group. In a recent study of the decision making of young people about post 16 options in West London, Lambe found that a considerable group of 15-year-old made decisions which reflected current fashionable trends as embodied in the lifestyles of peers, and the new curriculum initiatives perceived to have relevance to life in the Limelights. The third group, the inner direct segment, is a relatively smaller group of people who are seemingly indifferent to the behavior of others and make decisions based on their own convictions. The current university culture is characterized increasingly by a requirement to demonstrate a keen sense of competitiveness. A starting point for developing this is to have a full understanding of consumers' view of the institution's product and services. The answer lies in segmentation, a process through which the broad market is divided into smaller, homogeneous groups with similar purchasing and behavioral characteristics. It becomes the basis for developing a sound institutional positioning strategy. Decision at many levels of university strategy require complete understanding of the university's primary customer, the students, quality provision is the key driver of competitiveness. And the only view of quality that counts is that of the customer. From admissions and requirement through to teaching and training departments, accommodation, transport and services, widening participation and student retention, to requiring in the international student markets, the development and delivery of quality rest first and foremost in understanding the needs of customers and then proceeding to satisfy those needs. Next point of our video lecture is analytical tools. Segmentation thus provides a mechanism for understanding the customer of higher education through a sound knowledge of their demographic and behavioral profiles, their personality and lifestyles. While the foregoing has offered a broad overview of strategies and basis for segmentation in the higher education markets, it's important to examine in slightly more detail some of the key approaches and analytical tools that have been used in defining and developing market segments in higher education. In particular, we in this video lecture review the rationale and application of the following analytics tools, which are frequently used in market segmentation studies. So there are six analytics tools: factor analysis, cluster analysis, profiling, regression and correspondence analysis, and conjoint analysis. Conjoint analysis. The first, factor analysis. In a sense, factor analysis is an umbrella term used to describe all the processes used to gain a better insight and understanding about given data sets which are presented in the form of discrete entities. For example, a survey seeking the reasons prospective students have for joining higher education may identify a long list of different reasons. The task then is to find whether the reasons given form some kind of patterns for certain groups of respondents. Questions leading to such analysis could include, for example, do girls give the same reason as boy? Does age of prospective students have anything to do with some responses? Do the reasons show geographical patterns? Do any of the reasons given shown do any of the reasons given show positive correlation? This factor analysis is a group of techniques used to achieve two key purposes. The first, data reduction and structural detection. Factor analysis seeks to identify homogeneous subgroups within a population, and so is an indispensable indispensable tool for market segmentation. Next tool is cluster analysis. While factor analysis deals with individual variables and how they relate to other factors within a given range, cluster analysis goes a step further to investigate the relationship that may exist between groups of variables. The purpose again is similar to that achieved through factor analysis, that is, to reduce and interpret data. However, the unit for cluster analysis is no longer an individual variables but a cluster of variables. Cluster analysis thus seeks to identify a set of groups which both minimize within group variation while maximizing between group variation. For example, the LSC segmentation model for young adult identifies four broad segments: achieved, unfilled, disinterested, and rejectors. However, within each segment are a number of clusters which can be targeted separately. Among the unfilled segment are those who are carefree, financially restrained, with potential, low motivated, and time limited. These clusters constitute sufficient numbers to warrant distinct and differentiated communication and marketing strategies and messages. The carefree cluster would benefit more from communication messages which emphasize seeing themselves in a new world, while the unfulfilled with potential respond better to scare tactics which help them to move forward their potential to new levels of aspiration and achievement. Next, analytical tool number 3, profiling. Profiling is perhaps one of the most controversial techniques developed as a data strategy aimed at using personal data systems in investigating and monitoring actions of one or more persons. It attempts to predict the propensity of individuals or groups to behave in a certain way through a careful analysis of a broad range of characteristics of the group as known from official data sets. For example, one of the most widely used profiles of mature students is that developed by Lynch, which was based on 4 sets of data collected with assistance of the colleges and Central Application Office and Central Admission Services. The profiles were developed on the basis of the following: status, gender, and colleagues attended. Then age, route of entry, socioeconomic status, domicile, motivations for entering higher education. From this, Lynch has profiled a typical mature students in higher education as most likely to have the following characteristics: a person, often male under 35 years of age, has completed a school leaving certificate, lives in an urban setting, most likely to come from lower middle class background, studies part-time rather than full-time in further education rather than university, and finally likely to be pursuing an employment-related course. Profiling those utilized data system which the organization may already hold or which may be held by other organization to facilitate data concentration or matching. It has the long-term aim of predicting purchase behavior of various segments and more accurately to target marketing and communication messages to appropriate groups and individuals. Its most significant application has been the use of direct mailing to groups and individuals who are assumed to exhibit the profile of the intended market. Next analytics tool is regression analysis. Regression analysis is a statistical tool for the investigation of relationships between variables. When the analysis is based on the relationship of only two factors, simple regression analysis techniques are employed. When it involves a range of factors, then multiply regression techniques are applied. In both cases, the starting point is to plot data obtained on the variables on a two-dimensional scatter diagram in order to determine the nature of relationship between the variables. Thereafter, appropriate statistical formulae can be applied to determine the strength and relative influence of the range of factors. Next tool is respondents analysis. Respondents analysis is a set of techniques aimed at the visual representation of comparative data, resulting in the grouping of data categories for easy of display and interpretation. In this, it is thus a descriptive and exploratory technique to analyze data in tabulated form, providing information similar to that obtained using factor analysis. EVA used these techniques to provide a perceptual mapping showing the positioning of South African Business School. Based on 22 attributes, the mean score of business schools attributes were compared with the mean score of importance ratings to determine whether the aspect of business school offerings were being met. The same attributes were then rated by respondents. In terms of the importance the attributes had on the selection of a business school at which to register for the MBA degree. 6 factors in order of importance were identified as exerting significant influence on business school selection. There are reputation and recognition, academic quality, academic standards, views of current students and MBA graduates, value or relative to costs, and physical facilities. Correspondent analysis thus provides answers to those seeking to understand the preferences and choice made by certain segments of the market. It is possible, therefore, to use correspondence analysis to identify which institutions are favored by those who consider reputation and recognition as the key consideration in their decision to apply to an institution. Similarly, institutions can work backwards from this data to decide which of those aspects they would like to project more prominently as part of their positioning strategy. Next, conjoint analysis. This final tool that we consider in this video lecture. Conjoint analysis is a tool that allows a subset of possible combinations of product features to be used to determine the relative importance of which feature in the purchasing decision. The product has to be viewed as a combination of attributes which consumers consider either in isolation or in conjunction with each other to make a purchase decision. The goal of conjoint analysis is to assign specific value to the range of optional availables to a consumer when making a purchase decision. For example, a student might be involved in making a decision about which university to apply to. Among a range of factors they may consider, some will be more important than another, and the ultimate choice often reflects a trade-off between factors. Typically, therefore, conjoint analysis enables us to identify the major factors that influence choice and preferences, the relative importance attached to these preferences, and whether there may be groups of consumers for whom different factors were more important. In a study of Western Australian school leavers' university preferences, Turner found that the most important determinants of university preferences were course suitability, academic reputation, job prospects, and teaching quality. Conjoint analysis provides accurate insight into student decision making and the attributes that are more likely to create positive preferences, while giving insight into the presence of group needing specific targeting. It is indeed, as the DSS researcher on choice modeling argues, one of the best methods for measuring benefits sought by buyers. Understanding what people most value in an institution's products or services allowed the institutions to develop strategies to communicate those benefits and to even redesign existing products or ever create new ones with this in mind. Today, we no longer need to perform the statistical analysis on our own. There is a good French organization which can do such kinds of statistical analysis using a variety of computer software packages. And as conclusion, I would like to say that higher education has become big business characterized by increasing competition in the marketplace in any country in the world. New entrants into this contested marketplace face many challenges, not least of which is the need to position their products in a market that prides itself on the excellence in everything it does. The challenge for new universities is how to become excellent and at the same time also different. What this video lecture has done is to show that strategic positioning is best achieved when the institution has a good understanding of the market that it wishes to serve. Segmentation is a process that delivers such an understanding of the intended markets. This video lecture has explored the meanings and purpose associated with segmentation. It has shown that because universities are primarily about students, investing time and resources in understanding their needs is the starting point for developing products that will satisfy them. When we understand where our students come from, what their characteristics are, how they behave towards given stimuli and general patterns of their lifestyles and life circles, we can claim to have geographical, geodemographic, behavioral, and psychological basis for segmentation markets. And this enables new entrants into a market to decide which market to target and serve. It's only when we have a good idea of who we want to serve and why we want to serve them that we can begin to create space for outlets in the market. Thank you for your attention in this video lecture.